Columnist and associate editor of the Washington Post, David Ignatius, co-host of The Weekend and a Washington reporter for MS Now. Jackie Alemany filling in on Way Too Early this morning, and MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode joins us. So, Joe, happy Easter to everybody.
Happy Easter to everybody. Blessed Passover as well. And we're going to get into the news, but really quickly, we need to go to our basketball star, Jackie Alemany. Jackie,
yes.
I looked up halfway through the final yesterday and was shocked to see UCLA just absolutely controlling
the whole game,
the entire game. Never saw that coming.
Said something was stuck in her throat, but it is very rare. Well, first of all, this is their 31st consecutive win. So they didn't just make modern history, but that is an extremely long winning streak to be able to actually execute.
Just incredible. And Mika, I think the quote of the weekend actually may have come from Dan Hurley, who, when asked what exactly had happened to Gino, of course, Gino, who's been there forever and a day, Hurley said, well,
by it. And I loved Don's response. I thought the whole thing, Gino apologized. I mean, it played out well and showed some things
offline that town in Connecticut may not be big enough for both Gino and Dan Hurley.
Storrs?
Yeah, Storrs, Connecticut, pretty unassuming spot in Connecticut. They're growing up in New Englander. Watched with, disbelief as it has transformed into like the capital of basketball, at least college basketball, men's and women's side. But two great coaches, two significant egos, two big personalities there in Storrs. And we will see, Gino, that was not his finest moment this weekend. He has apologized since, but that did take away from what was a great game and a great facing off, though, against a favored and Michigan squad who looked absolutely dominant in the semifinals.
That Michigan squad looks amazing. Now, listen, we're going to get to Iran. There's a lot to sort through. The president's vulgar Easter morning post, where he managed to insult both every Muslim across the world and Christians on the most sacred morning in the Christian faith. But before we do that, I want to just read something that was passed along over the weekend. Actually, it was written on X, and it's extraordinarily insightful, and I want to read it. And it's good, a good friend of David Ignatius and this show's, but would love David to respond to Atlantic contributor Kareem Sajapour. He's, of course, one of the preeminent experts on Iran. And I just want to read portions of the thread now. And he says the defining deliberations of this war aren't between the U.S. and Iran, but Trump and himself. He's facilitated between walking away and promising to bomb Iran into the Stone Age. Iran's been consistent. Its ideology is resistant. Its strategy is chaos. Its endgame, survival. Trump has misunderstood the nature of the Islamic Republic. His threats to decimate Iran have not moved a regime which, since its inception, has shown itself willing to destroy the country and its people rather than compromise its power or ideology. In contrast to Trump, who has no fixed foreign policy views, Tehran's ruling class call themselves principalists because of their fidelity to the principles of the revolution above all resistance against America and the rejection of Israel's existence. These revolutionary ideas serve as both a glue holding the regime together and an anchor holding the nation down. The country will never advance without abandoning the ideology. The regime believes it can't survive if it abandons those same principles, though. Trump speaks about a conflict as a negotiation in pursuit of a grand bargain. Tehran may accept a narrow deal in exchange for a ceasefire, but its enmity toward the U.S. and Israel will remain. Ayatollah Khomeini chose martyrdom over normalization. His son will do the same. The paradox of the Islamic Republic is that it tends to compromise only under severe pressure. Yet that same external pressure and isolation have helped it entrench the regime. One clear lesson from Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Arab Spring is that the U.S. cannot dictate political outcomes. Regime opponents significantly outnumber regime supporters in Iran, but no outside power can forge a new national consensus for Iranians. The most urgent priority isn't Iran's nuclear program, it's the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran is trying to normalize it as its own Panama Canal. This is a problem that should have a diplomatic solution. Europe, Asia, and Arab partners all have a strong interest in keeping it open. Trump, of course, as we said, David Ignatius, Trump wants a quick deal. The regime, for ideological and structural reasons, can't make one. So long as the Islamic Republic rules Iran, the inevitable outcome is to return to the Cold War that predates this conflict and will likely outlast it. And finally, David, wars like revolutions are judged by the political orders they build, not by what they destroy. Trump is measuring this war by what he has destroyed. History will judge it by its lasting impact on Iran, the Middle East, and the broader global order. And David, it's what you have been explaining, what I've been trying to explain on this show time and time again. What you destroy doesn't matter. What you build, what is left behind is what matters. And right now, what is, again, difference militarily and politically. Militarily, they've hit targets, not as many as they thought they had, not as effectively as they thought they had, obviously, judging by the plane shot down over the weekend. But what exactly is going to be left behind remains an open-ended question, even more open-ended than before the first bombs started dropping.
So there's nobody wiser in assessing the Middle East and Iran in particular than Kareem Sajidpour. And people in Washington, in government, and every part of the media have been turning to Kareem for a decade for that kind of analysis that you just read. And it's deeply distressing to read his clear, honest account of where we are. He describes a president who, as he says in the beginning, has been vacillating between bombing Iran back into the Stone Age, and then in the next breath he'll talk about walking away from the conflict and leaving it for others to resolve. In contrast to this regime, hardline, brutal, but unwavering in its commitment to what it calls its principles. As this crisis continues, it just seems to wind down to ever greater danger than disruption for the region, ever greater loss of life. This weekend was, in some ways, the most painful of all, I felt. The heroic moment for the United States and our special forces, the rescue of the downed colonel in a mountain crevice in Iran, the number of people, the bravery, the deception to be able to get him out. It shows just how extraordinary our military is, followed by that vulgar Easter tweet. You know, Joe, 50 years from now, when people are trying to understand what this war was about, they'll read the language in that tweet, and then they'll look to other presidents in stress and what they said to the country. President Washington, President Lincoln, at the depths of the Civil War, level of loss of life unseen, and the calm and reflective way in which he spoke. Franklin Roosevelt during the nightmare of World War II. And then to read this almost like schoolboy vulgarity from the president was I think, shocking to all of us. So we're now heading toward another ultimatum. President Trump has said at 8 p.m. Tuesday, the world's going to come to an end in Iran. It's hard to know with each of these threats whether it's really a warning that Armageddon is ahead or a prelude to negotiation. But Joe, I think Kareem's measured analysis of how difficult this crisis is now, how hard it will be to solve, is exactly the right way for all of us to start the week.
And David, tell us where you think we are in this 38th day.
So, Joe, I think we're still balanced between the two fundamental themes of this war. Tactical brilliance of the United States military was demonstrated in a different way with this rescue mission, but it was an amazing feat of arms, showed off our special operations forces the ways they can do things nobody else on the planet can. But it also showed that Iran can withstand our best punch, and has got an asset in the Strait of Hormuz that it's very hard to take away absent diplomacy. I've been thinking that if Trump did go through with his threat to blow to smithereens every power plant, bridge, etc., that would probably make the Strait of Hormuz impassable for decades. It would leave behind such ruin and rage that the idea of reopening it under any circumstances would be almost impossible. I'm not sure Trump thinks through the consequences of that action. So we're again at a moment where to me the path out of this towards something that will stabilize the region and achieve the basic war goals of the United States requires us to work with our allies towards some kind of diplomatic solution. The idea you can just keep pounding the other guy and he's going to eventually say, okay, that's it. I think the evidence in this war points in a quite different direction.
Quite different direction, and maybe we saw some of that frustration Easter morning with that absolutely obscene quote that, again, insults every Muslim across the planet and a good number of Christians across the planet. And of course, there are those, David wrote, who would suggest, well, you just don't understand Trump. Trump is schooling everybody. He plays by a difference. No, it's not Donald Trump or our people in the media we're concerned about. It's what's the impact on those who consider America their enemies, and the impact is not good. Now, you of course, David, understand the impact of language like that better than anybody that we could have on the show and our Morning Joe family, because you actually were held as a prisoner of war for 7 months by jihadists when the Taliban seized you. And you talk about how far from intimidating jihadists who want nothing more than martyrdom and who want nothing more to bring down America and destroy the West. This is not a post that would frighten them, like it might frighten some people in the West who are intimidated by the United States and Donald Trump, but this actually energizes them and entrenches them even more. Explain that and what you learned, again, about the thought process of jihadists in the middle of a hot war while you were being held captive.
Thank you. It was a long time ago, but I don't talk about it very often anymore. But yeah, it struck me when this tweet came out last night. Yesterday morning. This is, not going to have an impact on a hardened jihadist. The Taliban are different than Iranians, but it's the same sort of very extreme religious view that if you die fighting for, your cause, you will become a martyr. You'll be rewarded for that. There's a lot of brainwashing that goes on. There were young men that I met in captivity. This was, I was kidnapped in Afghanistan and then held in the Pakistani tribal areas, and they were being brainwashed into being suicide bombers. So this, maybe this is an effective political style of argument to threaten your opponent in the United States, but I don't think it's going to cause the Iranian regime to back down. I talked to a Persian Gulf diplomat this morning who agrees that this just strengthens the position of the Iranian hardliners. And just one other anecdote for this weekend, I met with a group of Iranians, some of whom have just sort of fled to the U.S. in recent years, and they talked about when they can reach their relatives. Again, this blackout, this internet blackout continues inside Iran, which prevents protests, but these are moderates who've left the country, and they're talking to their parents and relatives, and they describe their parents watching Tehran be destroyed in front of their eyes. And they literally said the president, said on the night he launched these strikes, help is on the way. And so people in Iran are simultaneously sitting there waiting for help and, just baffled by these threats of massive destruction to civilian infrastructure.
A Pakistani government official close to the matter tells MSNOW that a framework to end hostilities between Iran and the United States has been put together by Pakistan with the help of Egypt and Turkey. The official adds the proposal was exchanged with the two warring countries overnight following the extensive conversations with both parties. It is said to be a two-tiered approach, starting with an immediate ceasefire, then followed by a comprehensive agreement. The official says there is no strict deadline, but given President Trump's public messaging, they are working to get something affirmed today. However, a Persian Gulf diplomat with experience in recent negotiations with Iran tells MSNOW that the Iranian foreign minister is expected to reject the offer, arguing in part that a temporary ceasefire does not work because of Iran's previous experience. Axios, meanwhile, cites sources who say the first phase of the proposed deal is a 45-day cessation of hostilities, providing a window to work toward a permanent end to the fighting, as well as a solution for the Strait of Hormuz and for Iran's highly enriched uranium. But they, too, add the chances for reaching a partial deal over the next 48 hours are slim as the two sides appear to remain far apart. Jonathan Lemire, there are a lot of different facets of this, regions that want an outcome that is toward peace. Again, it goes back to what David said and what David said, Ignatius and Rode. We're not dealing with a country that thinks the way one would. You know, they to David's point, have an extreme end to this in mind.
Yeah.
And so you can't reason. I mean, a proposal for a plan could fall flat over and over and over again because of the damage that has already been done.
Right. I mean, to get an agreement here, you needed rational actors, and certainly we could argue that Iran, not a rational actor. One has to wonder right now if we have rational actors in Washington, too, leading this. Yes, there's certainly a flurry of diplomacy here. Some of the neighbors of the region, Pakistan, from the beginning, has really tried to step up. They deserve credit for trying to broker a deal. It's been portrayed to me the same way that the Axios and others that you just read, that, yes, there's some talks here, but there's still not a lot of optimism or hope. But perhaps that will change between now and the president's deadline, which keeps shifting. It was originally going to be tonight, Monday night. Now it is tomorrow, Tuesday night, Eastern time. This is, to underscore what David Ignatius said earlier, it was certainly this weekend, though Iran proved it could still, defend itself, and shooting down not just the fighter jet, but also some of the rescue operations to try, helicopters and like, who were trying to help. But a remarkable success story, an incredible operation to retrieve these soldiers, to not leave anyone behind, these airmen. Really breathtaking. At the same time, this happens, and we have to look at the whole picture here, as Secretary of Defense Hegseth fires some of the top generals in the Army, including the Chief of Staff, during a time of war, which is unheard of right now as he continues to purge his foes out of the Pentagon. And then, of course, we have the president's tweet yesterday morning, which was not only just blasphemous and deeply insulting, but risks further inflaming the situation. And if he goes through with this threat, I mean, let's be clear what this is. This is not only just war crime, period, targeting civilian sites like these energy infrastructure, bridges, and the like, but will likely further turn the rest of the Iran population against us, who, to David Rhodes' point of a moment ago, have been waiting for help, still waiting. And instead, if we plunge them into darkness, return them to the Stone Age, as the president keeps saying, like, that's just going to inflame that situation more, potentially create a failed state, a refugee problem, but also turn the rest of the populace, who don't like the regime, but now if the U.S. sort of sets them back for decades, will turn against us too and just harden them in this conflict.
David, we need to go to break, but Jonathan brought up something that David Ignatius brought up something that I just want to underline, and Jonathan brought it up as well, and that is what we saw this weekend. Was an Iran that still has war-fighting capability. I was told 2 weeks ago from an intel source that has worked Iran for a generation that whenever he sees General Kane going out talking about the number of military targets destroyed, said it has eerie echoes of body counts in the Vietnam War, where every night we would dutifully hear how many of the Viet Cong were killed. And It was supposed to make Americans feel better. 3 weeks ago, this CIA analyst said, sounds a lot like a body count. They're far more resilient than the Trump administration thinks they are. They have far more equipment hidden throughout that terrain. This could go on for a very long time. It looks, David, 3 weeks later, like that's exactly where we are now.
So, Joe, their ability still 3 weeks now, a month into this war, to use power to shoot down American advanced warplanes and then menace those trying to rescue them is one demonstration of how they're still in the fight. They have planned for this really for years, and they're fighting with the conviction of their extreme ideology. And the fear is some growing support from the population. I hope that'd be the most dangerous outcome for us. We turn a country that was, a vast majority wanting change to a country that's beginning to resent America more broadly. But yeah, they're still in this fight. I do think the numbers tell us that they're very much weakened, but their ability to keep holding their hostage. Their hostage is the Strait of Hormuz. They've got their arms around our global economy's neck there, and there's no sign that they're going to relax that, absent diplomacy. We mentioned earlier the different strands of diplomacy. They're out there. The former Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif wrote in Foreign Affairs over the weekend a detailed peace proposal that has elements that would address every concern the United States and its allies have had about Iran. So that's one more strand for people to think about as they wonder, the Tuesday deadline approaching, is it bombs away, or are we going to maybe get to a negotiating table?
Okay, so everybody stay with us. We're going to have more from Jackie Alamany and David Rode in just a moment. Also, David Ignatius is going to talk about what exactly is the hope for Iran and what in recent history gives him hope for Iran's future. Also, retired generals Herdling and McCaffrey will be joining us. Morning Joe continues in just a moment. It's half past the hour. Very few Republican allies of the president have commented on his expletive-laden Easter Sunday post. Though Senator Lindsey Graham, who pushed for the war in Iran, wrote on social media that Trump is deadly serious when it comes to his ultimatum to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. However, former Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was once a close Trump ally, notably responded to the post, saying the president has gone insane and urged members of the administration to intervene in Trump's madness. Jackie Alamany, what are you hearing about reaction on Capitol Hill, and perhaps even some saying perhaps what many are thinking about not only the post, but the approach right now to Iran?
Yeah, Mika, well, lawmakers right now are benefiting from the luxury of being on recess, where they are not going to have to be confronted by reporters until next week. There is a feeling that they're probably just trying to wait this news cycle out. So can I just ask you something? Yeah.
Like it's Easter recess, but the post that the president put out, isn't that a reason for concern if you are a member of Congress, Republican or Democrat? Wait it out? Did you absolutely nobody weighed in any way?
Marjorie Taylor Greene was a little bit of the outlier. There was Don Bacon, who basically chided the president for his language, but didn't necessarily take issue with the actual content. What you're seeing here is while an overwhelming majority disapproves of this war in Iran, Republican support for the war still remains steadfast. However, I think the red line here that we've talked about the last few weeks for lawmakers is boots on the ground. That is what lawmakers are on high alert for. They have expressed private concerns. Some of them actually went public after some troubling briefings that they received behind closed doors. These were classified briefings from Pentagon officials about the direction of the war. But there has not been a lot of public accountability for President Trump. They have repeatedly declined to congressionally authorize what Trump is doing. And there was very scant reaction. I mean, Mike Lawler, there were a few Republicans who were on Sunday shows yesterday. He continued to voice his support for Trump's objectives and actually said that a lot of the criticism was misplaced, that it has objectively been militarily successful. I do think, though, patience is wearing thin. There are now several postponed deadlines. We're also nearing that 4 to 6 week period that Trump said this would be over. And again, I think the red line here is lawmakers do not want to see boots on the ground. It's something that we're going to be watching very closely today when President Trump makes remarks. He's going to be appearing in the briefing room, answering questions from reporters. I imagine he's going to be asked for more granular information on what exactly the plan is. There's been lots of shifting goalposts on what the military objectives are here and what the end game is. And we also have that 8 p.m. deadline tomorrow for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, where Trump has made a series of various threats on what he says will happen if it is not reopened.
Right.
You know, the muted response to a statement that would have been absolutely shocking, and it would have shut down Washington had it been done by Joe Biden, by Barack Obama, by George W. Bush, by Bill Clinton, by anybody that sat in the Oval Office before Donald Trump, shows you just how numb not only the Republican Party, but also a lot of members of the press have become to the most outrageous of statements. This was an outrageous Easter morning post, again, on the most blessed holiday for Christians across the globe. And the message that was being sent out, again, should have been insulting to the evangelicals who line up to support a president who doesn't support a great deal of what they have at least claimed in the past to have their values, but also, I think even more importantly for this discussion, has insulted Muslims across the world. And it's the last thing we want to be doing right now with Iranians who actually at one point wanted America to rescue them from the hell that they've been living under since 1979. Now, through all of this bad news, the bad news of the fact that, yes, we had a heroic operation to rescue pilots, and my gosh, what an uplifting story that was, extraordinary rescue. The bad news there, of course, though, is there had to be a rescue at all, because we've been hearing time and time again that the United States completely controls the skies over Iran. We found out this weekend that's just not true. But David Ignatius, despite the bad news, you have recent analysis for the Washington Post titled "Recent History Gives Me Hope for Iran's Future." David, on this Monday morning, please, good news now.
Well, let me give it a try. In these dark days, you do try to think what could justify the terrible suffering that people are experiencing. And I think back to my own 2 trips to Iran, the Iranian people, the passion they have for modern life. And I think also about how the Soviet Union, another monstrous regime that oppressed its people, oppressed its neighbors, finally collapsed because of patient, steady, consistent, measured American power over decades, working always with allies. And what was remarkable is how quickly that tyrannical regime in Moscow and in all the capitals of Eastern Europe